morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome back to Children's Church. I'm so glad to have you here with me. We're not in our usual place. We're somewhere else. We're outside. But that's okay. We're talking about holidays ahead of time. So today we're talking about the things that lead up to Good Friday before this Friday's Good Friday service. So we're going to start with the Last Supper, which they were celebrating Passover. And now the Passover we're in Luke chapter 22, verse 1. And now the Passover celebration was drawing near, the Jewish festival where only bread made without yeast was used. The chief priests and other religious leaders were actively plotting Jesus' murder, trying not to find a way to kill him without starting a riot, a possibility they greatly feared. Then Satan entered into Judas Iscariot, who was one of the 12 disciples, and he went over to the chief priests and captains of the temple guards to discuss the best way to betray Jesus to them. They were, of course, delighted to know he was so ready to help them and promised him a reward, so he began to look for an opportunity to arrest Jesus quietly when the crowds weren't around. Now the day of the Passover celebration arrived when the Passover lamb was killed and eaten with unleavened bread. Jesus sent Peter and John ahead to find a place to prepare their Passover meal. Gonna jump ahead a little bit. When the hour was come, he sat down and the 12 apostles with him. He said unto them, I wanted to have this Passover with you before I suffer, because I say to you, I will not eat more thereof, and I will not eat more until what it represents has occurred in the kingdom of God. Then he took his glass of wine, and when he had given thanks for it, he said, Take this and drink it, for I will not drink wine again until the kingdom of God has come. Then he took a loaf of bread, and when he had thanked God for it, he broke it apart and gave it to them, saying, This is my body, broken for you. Take and eat in remembrance of me. After the supper, he gave them another glass of wine, saying, This wine is a token of God's new covenant to save you. An agreement sealed with blood I shall pour out to purchase back your souls. But here at this table, sitting among us as friend, is the man who will betray me. I must die. It is part of God's plan, but oh, the horror awaiting the man that betrays me. And the disciples wondered among themselves. Any of them would do such a thing. Jumping forward. After supper, they went out to the garden called Gethsemane. And there Jesus left the disciples and asked them to pray. And he went up and prayed, and said, God, if there is any way this cup can pass from my hand, let it be so. But either way, let your will be done. And Jesus came back to the disciples a first time and found them asleep. And he was angry. I couldn't leave you for an hour to stay awake for me. And Jesus left them again. And when he came back again from praying, they were asleep again. And a third time that happened. And the fourth time Jesus came back, the temple chieftains had already sent police after to come get him. Asleep, he said, Get up, pray God that you will not fall asleep when you are tempted. But even as he said this, a mob approached, led by Judas, one of his 12 disciples. Judas walked over to Jesus and kissed him on the cheek in a friendly greeting, but Jesus said, Judas, how can you do this? Betray the Messiah with a kiss. But the other disciples saw what was about to happen. They exclaimed, Master, shall we fight? We brought along the swords. And one of them slashed at the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. But Jesus said, Don't resist anymore, and he touched the place where the man's ear had been and restored it. Then Jesus addressed the chief priests and the captains of the temple guards and the religious leaders who headed the mob. And am I a robber, that you come armed with swords and clubs to get me? Why didn't you arrest me in the temple? I was there every day. But this is your moment, the time when Satan's power reigns supreme. So they seized him and led him to the high priest's residence, and Peter followed at a distance. I want to do the part where Peter denies Jesus now. We're going to stop there. That's what leads up, that's Jesus' arrest, and that's what leads up to the events of what we call Good Friday, where he was tried, he was beaten, and he was crucified. And it's a very sad story. It's very grim. And the only reason we can tell it is because we know that even though Friday happens, Sunday is coming. So that's our lesson for this week. That's our little primer for what we're going to hear at the Good Friday service. That's Jesus having Passover supper. He knows that Judas is going to betray him. And they go to pray in Gethsemane, where Jesus is arrested. I want you guys to have a wonderful week. Keep up with your devotionals, and I'll see you for Good Friday service.